I asked 3 different AI softwares to build me a roller coaster on Planet Coaster 2, and as you watch the video, you will be able to see what the softwares are and what the coasters are. I have some great ones coming up, so don't miss it. And if you don't want to miss some of the epic content I have coming up, be sure to subscribe and maybe even drop a like. I really appreciate it. Alright, now let's get into the video. Our first AI software is ChatGPT, so let's ask it. First, I'm going to ask it what manufacturer the coaster should be made by. Looks like ChatGPT said Gerstlauer. Nice choice. Gerstlauer is well known for their Infinity Coaster model and their Eurofighter model. So let's see what ChatGPT says the model should be. Alright, and it looks like it said Eurofighter. Now let's ask it what coaster should we make it based on? Because remember, Eurofighters can be very diverse in what they can do. Ooh, looks like it said Mystery Mine at Dollywood. Now, I don't have personal experience from this, but I did watch a POV, so I can get a general understanding of what the ride is like. Now, Mystery Mine looks like a really interesting coaster because it has mostly bobsled elements from the Gerstlauer bobsled, but it also has some 2 inversions. Alright, now it's time to hop into Planet Coaster to see what I can do about this model. Over here in Planet Coaster 2, I made this roller coaster. It starts off with a little turn from the start. In the POV, I saw that Mystery Mine starts with a pre-lift, so that's what I did here, starting off with this turn. And then it goes into a vertical lift, which I also did here. After you crest the top of this 79-foot tall lift hill, you will encounter a beyond vertical drop, which is pretty standard for most Eurofighters. Next, you go into a small little step up, which would probably give some good airtime, into a 59-foot tall vertical loop. Now, I know that Mystery Mine does not include a vertical loop, however, most Eurofighters do. After the loop, you go through this maneuver, which is on Mystery Mine, so I had to incorporate it, and it's also on plenty of the Mauer spinning coasters. I also added a little building around it, which I think looks pretty good. Now, after that, you will go into just some small twists and turns and even a little hill, but then you reach your second lift hill, which Mystery Mine does have. And in the POV, it looks vertical, but actually, it's only 60 degrees. After you crest the top of this lift hill, which is 123 feet tall, you enter a little dip and into a little hill, which Mystery Mine does have. Then you do a twisted drop, which Mystery Mine doesn't have, however, I just wanted to include it. And then into an inversion similar to what Mystery Mine has. Next, you go into a nice turn that smoothly transitions into this roll. And finally, you go into an upward helix and hit the brakes. Now let's compare both of their stats. Mystery Mine is 1,804.5 feet long, while this coaster is 2,879.7 feet long. Mystery Mine is 43.5 miles per hour, while this coaster is 53.8 miles per hour. Mystery Mine has a height of 85.3 feet, while this coaster's biggest drop is 86.1 feet. And also, Mystery Mine has 2 inversions, while this one has 3. So we can see that this coaster completely dominates Mystery Mine in terms of stats. So now, instead of referring to this coaster as this coaster, let's give it a name, but we have to ask ChatGPT for that. ChatGPT said this coaster should be called Shadow Shaft, so that's what we name it. Now let's give it a logo, so let's also ask ChatGPT to generate an image for it. Well, looks like this is complete. Now let's move on to our next AI. Google Gemini is the next AI software we're going to be using. So let's ask it what manufacturer we could use for our Planet Coaster 2 project. At first it said Vekoma and a Vekoma Boomerang, and I kept asking it for coaster models that were in the game, but it never came up with any. So I asked it for a different manufacturer, and it said Intamin. Now let's ask it a model for that manufacturer. Okay, looks like Google Gemini said a Giga Coaster, and specifically Millennium Force at Cedar Point. So we're going to be going with a more relaxed style coaster, but still add in some fun elements. But before we get into Planet Coaster, we have to look at what Millennium Force is like. So it looks like it has pretty fast-paced layout with some overbanks and some quick turns. It also includes some pretty nice hills in here. I haven't ridden Millennium Force yet, but I think it will be a good ride. What do you think of Millennium Force? Well, now let's get into Planet Coaster 2 and build this ride. Alright, I just made this Giga roller coaster in Planet Coaster 2, and while we're going up this 17-mile-per-hour cable lift, I want to tell you about its name. The coaster's called Centurion, which is also from Google Gemini. I also generated these logos for the roller coaster. These logos are from Google Gemini, however, I didn't really like them that much, so I let ChatGPT build a logo, and it's much better in my opinion. If you're seeing this, please vote in the comments down below which logo you like better. After you ascend this beautiful lift, you go down this massive drop, which I actually had to dig a hole for because this coaster was originally not a Giga, but I had to make sure it was, so I added that pit. On that valley, you actually get 7 Gs of force, but then you go up into this airtime hill that banks to the right, and then you go into this little S-curve over some water into an overbank, which is a pretty small one, but then you go into another S-turn over some water again, and into another big turn, and over an airtime hill, which is also twisted. Next, you go into another overbank while going at high speeds, and into another turn, and another hill, but this one's a little more traditional. Next, you go into another turn, into an S-hill, and turn downwards left into a little tiny pit, and you go into some speed hills right here, passing by the station, and going a few more S-turns, and down at the water again, while doing a gradual S-turn into another overbank. Then you have a near miss with some more track while going over through another overbank. Then you go into another speed hill and a few more turns, and the ride is pretty much over by now. Then you go into this hill, which is another outer banked hill, and finally into the brake run, which I angled downwards for more realism. I also broke the brake run into 2 sections, one being the trim section, and another being the actual brake section. This is all just to be similar to Millennium Force. Now for this coaster, I wanted to have a lot of aspects of Millennium Force, but also make it my own. So that's exactly what I did, and I think it turned out great. So would you ride this coaster? Because I would. Alright, now it's time to compare stats like height, speed, length, and more with Millennium Force and Centurion. Millennium Force is 6,595 feet long. Meanwhile, Centurion is 7,086.7 feet long. Millennium Force has a drop of 300 feet, while Centurion has 312.7 foot drop. Millennium Force's high speed is 93 miles per hour, while Centurion's is 97 miles per hour. And also for fun, I wanted to say that Centurion is 7.36 G-force on the valley of the first drop, which is probably way more than Millennium Force has. So Centurion won with all the stats, but which one do you think is better? Because it only won by a little bit for each one. Vote in the comments which one you would rather ride, and if you've ridden Millennium Force, is it forceless? Anyways, now let's move on to our next AI. Microsoft Copilot is our next AI that we're going to be using to build our roller coaster in Planet Coaster 2. So let's ask it, what roller coaster manufacturer will this ride be? Ooh, B&M, that's a good one. And it also said a B&M invert. So now let's ask it what B&M invert should be similar to. Wow, Nemesis at Alton Towers. This roller coaster is going to be awesome. So let's head into Planet Coaster 2 and build this roller coaster. It's probably going to be pretty hard, so I'm going to use a lot of terrain usage. So here is the roller coaster I just made in Planet Coaster 2 that is similar to Nemesis Reborn. As you can see, I started it underground in a tunnel in an enclosed station, and I also added some lights down here, and it eventually goes up. And over here, I added some fire and water effects just because. And a fun fact about this lift hill is that it's actually, if it was on ground outside of all this terrain, it would be 194 feet tall, which is pretty crazy because Alpengeist is just barely taller. Now over here, you're into the sunlight and trees, and I'm sorry for all these glitching. I don't know why it is, but here you have your little pre-drop, which Nemesis Reborn does have. It's not too big, just enough to get a little bit of decent speed, but not too much to be a crazy main drop. Then you go into my own element, which is a inversion going downwards for the drop. I'm sure this element would give a lot of hang time if it were real. But anyways, after that, you go into kind of the main drop. You get actually a good amount of speed here. And then into a corkscrew, I believe, or another inversion. After that, you go into a cookie cutter B&M vertical loop, and then you do a pretty big turnaround. After the turnaround, you then enter a 0G roll kind of like element, but I'm not really sure what it would really be classified as. However, it does seem like it gives some pretty good hang time. Then you go into another turnaround and into an airtime hill, which I actually tried to give you some airtime to ride you there. After that, you do a downwards drop inversion, which seems very snappy. However, you definitely will hit your legs on the rocks. After that, you go into yet another turnaround before going into a cookie cutter vertical loop once again, but you still probably would hit your legs on the rocks. Now the ride is over, and you go into the break round. Alright, so I know this isn't my best work for Planet Coaster 2 roller coasters, and I don't really know what I was doing here, because I haven't really made any inverted coaster similar to the legendary Nemesis Reborn. And also, I just couldn't really get the smoothing right. So here is what it was. So would you ride it? Because it does have literal foot droppers on the ride. And I am very sorry for the glitching, because that's just my capturing software. Anyways, now it's time to compare stats. Now let's compare stats with Nemesis Reborn and this roller coaster. So this coaster has a height of 194 feet. However, we know that it doesn't really reach that height because it's always hugging the terrain. So let's go by drop. This coaster has a drop of 49.7 feet at its max, and Nemesis Reborn has a drop of 104 feet. Okay, so Nemesis Reborn wins this one. Next, let's do top speed. Nemesis has a top speed of 50 miles per hour, and this coaster has a top speed of 52.6 miles per hour, so this coaster wins in speed. Now let's do track length. This coaster has a track length of 3,476.7 feet, and Nemesis Reborn has a track length of 2,339 feet. Nemesis Reborn has 4 inversions and 3.5 vertical G-force at its max. However, this coaster has 6 inversions and 4.64 G-force at its max. Now we can clearly see that this coaster beats Nemesis Reborn in almost every category. Well, I guess I designed coasters with high stats. Now let's name the coaster. So I'm gonna ask Microsoft Copilot to name it. It said Inferno Reversal. That's a pretty interesting name. I asked Microsoft Copilot to design a logo, but I don't think it can do that yet. So I asked ChatGPT to design a logo. I tried 3 times, however, it did not work out so good for the letters. Anyways, did you like this video? Do you think it was a good thing in my channel? Should I do any more of these? Which is like the voiceovers with Planet Coaster 2? Or should I just stick to reviews and stuff like that? Let me know down in the comments. Also, please subscribe and like, because I will upload a lot more now that parks are coming back in season. Sorry for not uploading, by the way. And anyways, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.